So let's come to immigration. It's a very interesting one. I am a believer in a moderately healthy-sized Australia, I have to say. And I also recognise that we just have to...
But as Paul Keating once said, John, the best immigrants are your own children.
Well, I recognise, though, and there's a bunch of issues in this as well, that Australians are not having kids anymore.
That's right, yeah.
And that's a subject that needs to be addressed. Actually, one subset of it is the price of housing. We know that problems of accessing housing are delaying family formations. One of many factors, but it is. But let's come to immigration more broadly. And young people. Let's switch to young Australians. They're the future. You know, we've had our go in many ways, and I am a firm believer that people who have lived a lot of life can be helpful counsellors and even agent provocateurs to their successors. So that's what we're trying to do. But we're trying to be helpul. We actually care about the country.
We're the elders of our tribe. Yeah. I think we deserve to be acknowledged and respected.
Well, let's at least prompt a bit of thinking. How about that?
Yeah.
So we are an immigrant nation. It's quite astonishing. Yeah. I think the immigrant population of America is around 15%.
Correct.
Britain is around 15%.
We're 30%.
We're around 30%, over 30 actually. And then there's another 20%, you might fall into this category yourself, where one parent at least was not born in Australia. Now, let me put a twist on this first, and then we'll come to some of the economic issues around it. I was talking to a great Australian yesterday who gave up being a motor mechanic to go and train people in Asia in English as a second language. And he came to me because he said, we need a program. I keep running into immigrants in Australia who say, I want to understand Australia. I want to be an Australian. I want to know what makes a place tick, why it's a better place than the one I came from. But he said it's nearly impossible for them now to gain access to any reliable information. And he said the schools are even worse. He said their kids go to school where they're basically told, they're taught Aboriginal history, but they're not told anything about how we became a democracy, how we became the country that we are today. We need to do something to help them actually understand what it is so that they can support it. But it raises this question as, you know, do you lose a certain sort of understanding of what it is to be Australian? You and I believe in the nation state, I think, as a logical basis for a coherent, free, prosperous society built on an engaged and vibrant citizenry. We're losing all of that. We're losing our commitment to it.
If you don't...
How do we make sure that we manage an immigration program that doesn't make it even harder to develop a sense of unity?
Well, the interesting thing is that when you actually speak to migrants, and if you use Ubers and taxis, it's impossible not to speak to migrants, regardless of your own immediate circle.
Or buy fuel, I might add.
Yes, they're very happy to be here in Australia. They love being in Australia, and as far as they can, they just want to fit in. Now, their leaders aren't necessarily of that disposition, because a lot of so-called community leaders basically want to turn migrant groups, particularly recent migrant groups, into victims because that helps them, perhaps. But essentially, every migrant who comes to this country is voting with his or her feet confidence in Australia. And so it should reassure us about the fundamental worth of our society. Yet instead, as you've just touched upon, John, our kids are constantly indoctrinated about Invasion Day. Our university students are constantly indoctrinated about the evils of the patriarchy and our environmental despoliation and so on. Sure, some things we've got wrong, no doubt about that. But fundamentally, what happened subsequent to the 26th of January 1788 was a very good thing. Let's face it, until very recently, the Torres Strait Islanders, maybe they still do, they used to call the coming of Christian civilization as the coming of the light. That's how they referred to it, as their leader said at the Constitutional Convention back in 1998, the coming of the light. That was what it was. And that was the moment when so much that is good so much that Aboriginal people today enjoy first came to this ancient continent. The rule of law, concepts of human rights, notions of equality, the idea that everyone had a duty to everyone else. These were all things that were completely foreign to ancient Australia. And sure, I guess the Aboriginal clans inevitably ceded sovereignty and much possession to the newcomers. But what happened was a vastly better society and a vastly better way of life for everyone, including the descendants of the original inhabitants. And look, John, I mean, I think we should cherish the fact that we were settled by Britain. We shouldn't be embarrassed about the fact that we were settled by Britain. By virtue of being settled by Britain, the country which has probably had more influence on the modern world than any other, we speak the world's common language. We share in the heritage, the mother of parliaments, the rule of law, the scientific revolution, the emancipation of minorities. All of these things began and flourished first in Britain. That's part of our heritage, and we should be proud of it. And regardless of the background of our migrants, regardless of what country they come from, their religion, their ethnicity, they should be encouraged to participate fully in that heritage, which has become their own heritage, because they need to join Team Australia rather than simply live in Hotel Australia.